Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today on it feels like the official first day of fall. I know we're a month in, but hopefully you're cozy either at your home office or your regular office with a warm drink. We are going to talk about freeing yourself from debt. We have Cassandra, who goes by Cass, with us today from Mountain America Credit Union to discuss some tips and tricks for your financial wellness. So, Cass has actually transitioned from social work to financial services in 2010, and she has a huge passion for helping others achieve their goals. She has a master's degree in education, and she creates these wonderful learning experiences so that people can enhance their financial growth. And then outside of work, Cass loves family moments and music, outdoor activities, and sharing silly videos of her golden retrievers with others. So we are lucky to have her here today. But I will turn the time over to you, Cass, and we can get started.
Awesome, thank you. I'm just getting this PowerPoint pulled up. I should have done this a minute ago. Let's see. Okay, you all should see my screen with the presentation.
Yep.
Let me get these panels expanded again. Here I go. I thought I had what I needed, and there we go. Yay! Thanks. So yeah, I'm Cass. I've been with the credit union now for about 5 years. And this is kind of a fun topic to talk about. One of the things that I want to point out today is that it's likely that you've heard of debt pay down strategies before. Out of curiosity, raise your hand if you have already tried a debt payment strategy, or if it's something that maybe you've heard about but haven't quite taken the time to do more investigation. Just kind of curious to see where everybody is right now. Give me you can put it in the chat. Let's go that way, or let's start there. Wow, I'm really struggling with the WebEx today. Yeah, a couple people. Awesome. A few people raised their hands. Yep. Okay. Well, yeah, so today, what I hope for you guys is that this will be a different experience just off of the content itself is going to be a little bit of a different approach than what we are usually used to hearing about, right? It's likely that you've heard about the debt snowball and the debt avalanche before. And those are great methods. We're definitely going to talk about those if you haven't heard of them before, but I'm also going to talk about a framework that will hopefully help you not just start a plan, but really find something that you can stick to. So that's our goal for today. Specifically, we'll talk through this framework for success that's not only going to help you define what your goal is, but actually create a plan that you can stick to. And as part of that, as we start to think about our debt repayment goals, we want to think about how we are going to organize our debt. And that is important because once we kind of know what our debt looks like and have it organized, we can start to determine our strategy. In between that, we've got to look at our budget to see realistically what we can do with our money to help us stay on top of this goal. So that is going to be our agenda for today. Starting first with the creating framework for success. So again, one of the most difficult parts of a debt repayment plan is the part where we stick to it, right? And for many of us, if you have a house, if you have a car, sometimes even student loans and credit card debt, those can take years to pay off. And so one of the things that we need to think about before we even start this pay down plan is making sure that we have something in place that will allow us to stick to our plan, whether it is just a couple of years or whether it is decades if you're looking at paying off your mortgage. So that's why this is going to be important. Raise your hand if you've seen this model before. I know we've done a few presentations this year, and so if you've seen this before, feel free to put a hand up or do a thumbs up reaction. I don't see any reactions yet. Maybe this is because of how I've got my WebEx set up. But yeah, so I'll quickly explain this. Even if you have seen it, it's nice to have a little bit of a refresher. So this is the why, what, how, and this is essentially the framework that we're going to teach you today. The why, what, how really comes from a lot of different places. You know, we had looked at some books that are really around, you know, behavior, to start to think about what kind of strategies we can put into play to help create plans that will ultimately be able to come to fruition, so long as we can keep our emotions from getting in the way. So the why really starts with understanding why we are even on this path. Why are we even on this path to pay down our debt? If you wouldn't mind putting in a chat, what are some things that are motivating you to pay off your debt? Let's kind of define some of what this why could look like. Approaching retirement age, yeah, being able to afford retirement, not having to have a side hustle or a gig to kind of support the income, having a better credit score, good, buying a new home. Yeah, these are all great reasons on why we feel like being, you know, having little debt or none is important, right? Because there's more to just this, like, I approaching retirement, or I want to buy a home, right? Those might be kind of some of those larger feelings. But if we start to look at like what that says about us, it often ties into our values. So Andrea, if you don't mind, I'm gonna pick on you because you shared the idea of buying a new home. If you buy a home, what does that say about you in terms of your values? Not sure. What about like what's motivating you to buy a home? Yeah. Okay, good. So I see a couple of things in there. Yep. And Kathleen, I love your input as well. Some permanence, yeah. So let's think about how those tie back to some of our values. Now, I don't know, Andrea, I'm not sure that we've ever talked directly, but based on this hope to own a home, or this desire to own a home, I can make some assumptions about what's truly important to her, and probably a little bit of assumptions about her identity. So things like having ownership of something, you know, there's that means something to us, right? It could mean that we're a hard worker. It could mean that we are providing for our family. It could mean that we are stable, right? And so what you start to learn is that your why is not so much about what you're after, right? This idea of buying a new home is more of a goal. It's what we would put under the what section, and I'll explain that more in just a minute. But what I want you to recognize is your why is about who you are and who you ultimately want to become. And so when we're thinking about our whys when it comes to being debt free, some examples of this might be like, well, I want to be financially independent, or I value a sense of stability, or I value, you know, feeling confident in my future, as some examples, right? And if you've read James Clear's Atomic Habits, he'll tell you that your habits are often rooted in your identity. And being able to successfully create a habit comes back to who you are and who you ultimately want to become. And so kind of keeping that in mind. Now, why is that important as we start to think about what we want to achieve? Which is that what section in the middle. Well, we all have reasons for doing things, and oftentimes it comes back to our why. And when we create goals around our why, we are more likely to stick to them because they are genuinely, you know, part of who we want to be, or really important to us. And so if we can understand, kind of focusing again on that why category, what it is that we want and who we ultimately want to become, that really creates a solid foundation for the things that we are going to have to do, which is listed in our how section. So to break this down, our why is our values and who we ultimately want to become. Our what is our goals. So when we're thinking about goals, we want to make sure that we're creating specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound goals. So not just I want to retire or I want to get out of debt, but I want to get out of debt in a specific amount of time. And, by making a set number of payments or a set payment amount for the next X number of months. And then finally, our how is the steps that we're going to take to make sure that the goal that we've listed in the what section is going to come to fruition. So I'll give you a more solidified example of this in just a minute. But really speaking to, breaking down these a little bit more. So in summary, the why is really understanding what it is about this that's driving us to pay off the debt. Is it the sense of stability? Is it a sense of freedom? Is it a sense of autonomy? If I'm not paying X amount of money every month towards that means I can do something else that I want to do, as an example. Another thing that's really powerful as we think about our why is what would it be like to be debt free? If we can visualize ourselves without debt and what that might feel like, because we are humans and we primarily operate with our brain and our emotions, that feeling of being debt free and what that means to us can ultimately be the difference between sticking to a goal or starting down that path and getting distracted by something that's more fun or more seemingly important in the moment. Okay, any questions on why we would look at our why before we start to talk a little bit more about the goal section or what? Well, let's keep going then. So in the what section, this is where you identify your goals, right? And I've already talked about specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound. But another thing I want you to think about is you're coming back to that time-bound piece is this goal a short-term goal? Is it a mid-term goal? Is it a long-term goal? Because when I understand what that goal looks like, that's really going to impact the strategy that I choose for my pay down plan. So having an understanding of what that goal looks like. And then finally, the how. The how section is that third column on the right side of the screen. And the purpose of that is to really help us go beyond this specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound goal to a very clear action plan, step by step of what I need to do in order to make sure that that goal comes to fruition or that it happens. So there's some things that we can put into place, especially when it comes to debt repayment. Things like setting up automatic transfers for monthly payments and upcoming expenses. If you've sat through our budgeting presentation, we talk a lot about how automation and planning for upcoming expenses and unexpected expenses can impact our budget and our ability to stay on track. And so when we're talking about automation, the power in that is that it takes away the part where we have to think about it, and then a part where if you feel feelings about having to pay your bills, like, oh, I'd rather be doing something else instead with that money, kind of takes that away. Okay. And it can be a really powerful thing. Now, when it comes to debt repayment, we'll talk about fixed payments in just a minute. But having that automatic transfer of a fixed payment can actually help you pay down your debt faster. So that's kind of a cool thing. Now, remember earlier I said, our goals to pay down debt can last, a few months all the way to a few decades, depending on what we're working on and how much debt we have. And so again, in our how, one of the things that we want to be mindful of is that we have to stay motivated, and it's not always going to be easy. And so when we can keep our why in sight, that's going to give us that power. It's maybe that boost of motivation or focus that we need to stay on track with our plan. Another thing that we want to be thinking about is an accountability buddy. I am somebody personally where unless I know somebody's gonna check in with me, or if they're, they're relying on me to do something, if it's just for me, I'm less likely to do it. It's a bad habit. And I know people are like, treat yourself just as well as you treat somebody else. But like, frankly, to be real here, I am somebody who's not good at that. And so something that is really helpful for me is to have somebody who I know is going to check in with me and say, hey, you set this goal a while back. How's it going? Is there anything you need to change? Is there something that you need to talk through? Okay. Your accountability buddy can be anybody you trust. It could be a spouse or a partner. It could be a friend or a family member, or even a financial guide, like the coaching that Mountain America offers, where we can happily sit down with you, help create a debt repayment plan, and then check in and see how things are going. So that's what I want you to keep in mind as you think about your how. Other how items might be, I need to divvy out this money for a specific expense because I know that that's going to be the thing that derails me, like we just spoke about earlier. But these are really kind of some of the key things to think about as you think about your strategy of how you're going to fulfill that goal. Some other things that can be helpful, especially in the context of debt repayment, are kind of going back in reflection and thinking about how we got to this place. Debt happens for a variety of reasons. Debt can happen because of unexpected expenses. It can happen because, you were out of work for a period of time. It can happen for other life events. It can happen. Some people go into that's a future me problem. And I'm not here to judge. That's something that a lot of people do, but we've got to come back and we got to think about, how did we get here? Having that understanding of what's happened in the past to lead us to this point where we're looking at our debt and saying, oh, now we got to pay this off. That can actually help us stick to our plan. And so if we can start to think about, what was it? If this was an unexpected expense, is that expense going to happen again, or could it happen again? And if so, how do I make sure that I'm prepared for it so that it doesn't derail me from staying on track with my pay down plan? On that topic of potential barriers to success, let's think about what else could get in our way, keeping in mind that for a lot of types of debt, it could take us a bit of time to pay these things off. And so what other things could come up and get in our way, and how do we plan ahead so that if those things do happen, we already have a plan in place and it's not going to take us away from the existing plan. One thing that I really want to underscore as I'm talking about this why, what, how model and essentially creating your roadmap to paying off your debt is sustainability. Now, there are people who are like, I would love to be able to pay this off in a year, and so I'm going to eat rice and beans and ramen for the next 12 months so that I can get that debt paid down. That's fine if that's something that you really feel you can do for the next 12 months. For most people, though, they're not willing to put their life on hold to go and take care of debt that they've accumulated. And so we've got to find a way to make sure that whatever plan we put in place allows us to continue to live at a level where we're satisfied. And yeah, in some cases, we may have to make a few sacrifices, right? If I'm somebody who loves to shop on Amazon and hit the Prime Day sales, I may have to cut back a bit on my spending so that I can make sure that I'm continuing to pay off my debt. And so there's some give and take there. But what I don't want to see with these debt paydown plans is that you're just like, I'm cutting everything and my life is miserable for a period of time while I get this paid off. Because frankly, most people who create a plan like that are not going to stick to it. Okay. And I'm just being realistic here. I would rather have you take a longer time to get to your goal so that you can continue living your life at a relatively comfortable level than have you not get there at all because the plan just wasn't sustainable. So again, I'll plug financial coaching here. This is something that my team, we have a group of experts who are really good at looking at these pay down plans, helping you come up with a pay down plan that's sustainable, and saying, hey, how do we make this work for you? Okay, and I will tell you, in most cases, there's not a perfect, exactly right answer for every single person, right? Sometimes we have to get a little creative and come up with some strategies to really make sure that this continues to work for that individual. So remember, we were talking about the why, what, how model, and I promised you that I would show you an example of this. And I hope that going through these extra slides in between really solidifies, as you see this, what we're talking about. So this is an example of somebody's debt paydown plan. The why is really filled with want to be statements, and it doesn't have to be. It could just be a list of values or who you want to become. But for this person, it was empowering for them to say, this is who I want to be, or I want, and so you'll see that I want to be financially secure. I want to have more money available to provide for the needs of my family. I want to have more money available to create memories with my family. So their what's involve debt repayment and savings, and that feeds back to them in these areas. So for them, they've said they'll pay off $4,500 of debt in 3 years by paying $125 a month. Cool. That sounds like it's a really sustainable, plan. They also said that they'll build an emergency savings to cover 3 months of expenses in 2 years by saving $500 a month. Now, when I met with this person, I was like, that's really cool. That sounds like a really great goal. It's kind of aggressive. Do you feel like you can save $500 a month? And she's like, well, yeah, if I cut back on this and I stop doing that. And I said, well, hold on. What's your willingness to actually do that? And she said, honestly, it's going to be really hard for me to transition to that. And so we looked at her budget, and I actually said to her, well, what if we do this? What if we start saving, $250 a month? And as this debt gets paid off, you can start contributing a little bit more so that you're not having to give up everything all at once, again, making the plan unsustainable. And so we adjusted this goal for her. It was 4 years with $250 a month. But here's the thing. Again, she's going to get there slower, but we know she's going to get there because she has something sustainable planned. Now, remember in the how section, I told you this is where you break down those tasks that you might have to do, maybe once, but maybe you have to do them repetitively. Maybe it's a weekly thing or a daily thing that you get to do. So for this individual, their priorities were to hold a weekly budget review with their partner. They share money, and so it made sense to just say, hey, this is where we are and how things are going. They also were going to set up monthly automatic payments for their outgoing expenses and then upcoming expenses as well. So things like if you drive a car and it's a matter of time that you've got to replace your brakes, let's start saving for that now. Every year you have to register your vehicle if you drive a car. So let's make sure that we're putting a little bit of money away every single month so that when it comes time for that registration, we're not relying on a credit card. We're not having to skew our budget and potentially take money away from our debt repayment plan. It's already there for us and it's ready to go. And then they had also created a couple secondary savings accounts as well as a payroll deposit to a savings account outside of their financial institution, which allowed them to start saving for their emergencies. So this is an example of that why, what, how plan. Now, again, our team can help you with this. You can also find out how to do this on macu.com/brain. If you've sat through Money in the Brain before, you've seen this model before, but on macu.com, we do have kind of the guide on how to walk through that. Any questions before we move on to the next topic? Okay, I'm going to keep going. This next few sections we're probably going to go through a bit quicker. Again, because a lot of this is information that you've heard, but now you have this framework in mind to start to think about how we can maintain consistency and create a sustainable plan. So when it comes to organizing our debt, this is really helpful for us to do because we need to be able to see all of our debt in one big picture. And understanding things like interest rates and monthly payments will actually come into play as we determine our payment strategy. So when we start to look at our debt, there's a few ways that we can actually keep track of this information. One of those ways is through a digital money management system. Things like our online banking can help us. There are different apps that you can use that will actually put your they'll put your debt in order, so to speak, so that you can see everything in one place. Another option is a spreadsheet. Do I have any Excel fans out there? Excel scares me, to tell you the truth, but if you love Excel, kudos to you. There are some really great templates out there to help you organize your debt. Another thing that can be really helpful for organizing your debt is just straight up notebook and pen, or a piece of paper and a pen. It doesn't have to be anything fancy, okay? I will share a link here in just a minute to to our website where we actually have a debt worksheet that you can list all of your items on. That way you have everything that you need right in front of you to start getting organized. So I'll share that in just a second. All right. So another thing we want to think about as we organize our debt is really, who do we owe, how much do we owe, and what are their interest rates on the loans. Knowing the minimum payments can be helpful, but really these are the three key things that we want to focus on. When we know these, we can start to think about how we want to organize and how we want to strategize to pay off our debt. So the next section we're going to talk through is evaluating our budget. Now remember, part of creating a great debt repayment plan is making sure that we're creating a sustainable plan. And that has everything to do with the way that we spend money and the way we want to spend money, knowing that these debt repayment plans are going to take us a little bit of time in most cases. So we want to start by evaluating our budget. Now remember, there are people out there who will just cut everything down to bare bones in order to pay down their debt faster. But my concern with that is that maybe it's not the most sustainable plan. So let's look at how we're spending our money right now to make sure that when we do create our strategy and lay out our plan, we're not cutting too much away and making a plan that isn't going to work for us in the long term. Now, there are a few ways for you to track your money and your spending. You likely already use an app to track your spending, but if you don't, you might be looking at your bank statements. And then finally, as you're looking at your spending, you may be wanting to think about, well, where can I start to cut? For many of us, we make preference purchases every month. And so that would be the first place that we would want to look to see if we can start to make additional payments on top of our minimum payment for each of our debt payments. Now, keep in mind though, preference purchases can sometimes be, they're always like the things that we'd like to have, but we don't need to have. But keep in mind, you are ultimately the person who defines your needs. So if you're somebody who relies on a gym membership to make sure that you're working out daily to keep your mental well-being up, that's probably not a preference purchase to cut, because yeah, while it's a nice to have, it's probably also a need to have in order to keep your well-being in check. Okay, so kind of be thinking about that. Keep that little caveat in mind with your preference purchases. So once we've kind of started to look at where we're spending and where we might be able to potentially cut, the other thing we want to keep in mind is, well, what am I looking for in terms of, do I want to make extra payments? And if so, how much can I set aside without compromising without compromising like this level of sustainability that I need to keep? So one component of that sustainability, like I mentioned before with budgeting, is looking at what do we know is upcoming and what do we know could be happening, but we don't know for sure. Okay, when we budget for those things, the things that might happen and the things that are definitely going to happen, and it's a matter of time, we are more likely to stick to our payment plan, even if those things happen or when those things happen, because we've already started planning ahead for that. That's part of our debt repayment plan. Okay, I don't want you to just think about the things that, every month I pay this, but I want you to think about the things that are maybe 6 months or 12 months down the road and how you can begin preparing for those so that when they do happen, you can continue to pay your debt as you had planned, but also be able to address whatever it is that's come up either expectedly or unexpectedly. Any questions before we talk about strategies for debt repayment? Any thoughts? Are you guys, is anybody already kind of doing this or maybe working through this step of your debt repayment plan? Feel free to come off of mute too. If it's easier to come off of mute and share, I'd love to hear more. I'll ask one more question. Um, Having this new information, how might you go about your debt pay down plan a little bit differently?
I think by you mentioning the different apps, I'm gonna start looking at some different apps to kind of help, with the budgeting, the paying, the savings, and I've kind of forgotten about apps until you mentioned it. So I think that's one thing I'll do to kind of strategize how I want to move forward.
Yeah, I love that. One thing I will say about apps is they can be really helpful. I always encourage people to look for, look at the safety features, read the reviews, and if it is a paid app, because so many of them are now. I used to love Mint, and they phased Mint out, sadly. But like if you are going to pay for an app, just be sure that it's adding more value than what you're paying. And so, an app might be $50 a year or $8 a month. But what I would say is just make sure that that's actually benefiting you. Sometimes we set up these apps with good intentions and then they fall apart. Me myself, I've been guilty of that. I paid for a year subscription of Rocket Money, like thinking, wow, this is such a great app, and it is. But I like lost motivation 2 months in. And so it wasn't something that worked for me, but definitely take advantage of the free trials and try those out to see, what works for you. I love that. Kathleen, I love that you said that you're going to scale it back to be more reasonable. Um, and again, I think that is a great plan. Knowing that we have a sustainable plan in place. Yeah, we're not going to get there as fast, but we know we're going to get there, I think is a really good approach to making sure that, we do things a little bit different with our debt repayment plan now than maybe what we've done in the past. So let's talk a little bit about debt repayment strategies. And this is probably going to be the part that feels really familiar for you. So the first one that we're going to talk about is debt snowball. And I'll compare and contrast that with debt avalanche. I'll talk about refinance, consolidation, and balance transfer. And then I will talk about GreenPath as another debt repayment strategy. So starting first with debt snowball. Raise your hand if you've heard this one before. Throw a thumbs out in the reactions, or yep, cool. Couple of us, yeah. So debt snowball is a really popular strategy, and a lot of people have had a lot of success with it. If you're not familiar with debt snowball, it's essentially this idea where you organize your debt from the lowest balance to the highest balance. Remember when I said organizing your debt would be important? This is where it comes into play. So you're going to organize your debt from the lowest balance to the highest balance. You're going to make minimum payments on all of your loans. And if you are paying extra, then you're going to put your extra amount on the lowest balance. What that does is that accelerates the pay down on that balance when you're paying extra on it. Now, when that first loan is paid off, you're going to take all of the money that you were paying on that extra plus the minimum payment on that loan that you just paid off, and you're going to roll it over into the next balance. And you're going to continue to do that until your debt is paid off. So here's an example of that. You can see this individual has a couple of credit cards and an auto loan. So they are starting first with their Explorer card, an $1,800 balance at an 8% APR. And this was started back in January of 2024. So mind you, the dates are a little bit off, but essentially taking them, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, what are we? Maybe 16, 17 months to pay off. And what they're paying is their minimum amount, but they're also paying an extra $100, which you don't see on here. Okay, so that's how they're able to take and pay that payment balance off. Now the cool part is once they're done paying that off, they'll take that 36, well, it's really 136 now, and they'll put it on this $48. And then they'll pay off that card. And as they pay that off, then they'll pay off the next card, the super card. And then finally, they end up paying almost $900 a month, but they're able to pay off this auto loan in a much quicker time frame. So as you can see on this chart, we're really looking, you can see how quickly things start to go down as they go. And I think that's the thing that's the most exciting about this is that the debt acceleration. So I did this with a calculator a few years ago, and just paying minimum payment on a credit card, it was saying like, oh, you'll pay this off in 11 years. And I was like, that's outrageous. They said, well, what if I pay this amount on it? And they was like, oh, well, you can have this paid off in, 2.5 years. And I was like, wow, that's really cool. So kind of keeping that in mind that like, this is taking into consideration credit cards plus an auto loan. And you can see that you're paying it off in 29 months and you're saving almost $2,500 in interest. So this can be really exciting. Now, something that I have found interesting in my days of financial coaching and talking to people about money is even saving this much money, like that's cool. That really fires people up. What people don't like to think about is how much money they're paying in interest to the lenders that they're borrowing money from. So this 8%, 7.99, like these are all really incredible rates. In fact, you won't see these on credit cards right now, just because of the economy and the interest rates rising. But what I will say is this still drove people nuts to think, oh, I'm paying 8% on this $1,800 balance. So people who maybe get a little bit more motivated by saving money on interest might appreciate the debt avalanche strategy a little bit more than debt snowball. So debt avalanche is similar to debt snowball in the sense that you're going to organize your debts in a certain way. You're going to pay all of your minimum payments on the loans, and you're going to pick your account. Like you're going to pick an account to put more than the minimum payment on. And as you pay off that balance, then you'll pay off the next loan and the next loan until it's paid off. The difference here from debt snowball is that instead of focusing on your lowest balance, you're actually going to focus on your highest interest rate first. So let me show you what that looks like. So here you can see we've got these organized just a little bit differently. If you remember in the debt snowball, we were paying off the SuperCard right before we started paying off the auto loan. But in this case, it's the first one to be paid off because the interest rate is so high. Now here again, you would pay in this case $213, and as you paid this card off, then you'd pay off this, the $213 plus this $36, and as that paid off, you'd roll down to the Greenlight card until it was paid off, still paying at the end almost $900 a month. What I like to point out to people is that the payoff is the same amount of time. It's still 29 months as we did it with the debt avalanche, but what you'll see is the interest savings a little bit different. So here you're saving close to $2,700 if we round up, right? And over here, you're saving closer to $2,500. Now, for people who are really motivated by saving money on interest, they're stoked about this number. Even though it's not that much of a difference, people get really excited about it. Overall, though, what we've seen is people tend to be more motivated by debt snowball. Why do you think that's the case? Why would people be more motivated by debt snowball than debt avalanche? Yeah, you're going to see progress faster. Exactly. So you can see over here, even with the timeline, it's March of 2026. But if I look over here, it's also March of 2026. But look at how these start to line up. You've got May, July, March, like they line up here. But people really like to see like, oh, I got that card out of the way. And now I got that card out of the way. So it's kind of interesting. In a lot of cases, it's really understanding what motivates you and sticking with that. It's funny how much of our money relates to our brains and behavior, isn't it? It's something that a lot of people, like I feel like when people start to make that that connection, it really becomes empowering for them. Yep, great. So next we're going to talk about refinance. Yes, thank you for asking that. The examples don't take into account any continued spending. Right. So what this assumes is that they are not charging on any of their credit cards. They're not taking on any additional loans. Good call out. So another thing we can look at is refinancing the loan. Now, a refinance is essentially just changing up the loan terms. So you could be changing up your minimum payments, you might be changing the length of your loan, or even changing out the interest rate. One thing I will say with a refinance is that it's very important that when you rewrite that loan, you commit to not having any more debt. So sometimes we'll see this, like if somebody has like a Mountain America Visa as an example, they'll rack up a balance and then I want to get that paid off and I don't want to have the option to charge on it and take on any more debt. So we'll say, cool. And we'll actually refinance that loan and turn it into a personal loan where they have a lump sum of money up front and then they're making regular monthly minimum payments at least. And so when we do that though, sometimes what happens is people will, now they've got that personal loan and then they've got this credit card that still has an available balance that they can charge up. So that's why I say it's important that when you make these kind of changes, it's really critical to take that step to commit to not taking on any more debt. Again, going back to, well, here's why budgeting is an important part of our debt repayment plan. So far, we've covered debt snowball, debt avalanche, and refinance. Next, we're going to talk about consolidation. We'll also talk about balance transfer, and then we'll wrap up by talking about GreenPath. So sometimes people will tell me, well, what about a debt consolidation plan? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do that. Debt consolidation plans can be really helpful, especially if you have multiple loans that you're looking to roll into one loan. So you might see somebody take out a personal loan to pay off their credit cards as an example, or they may take out a home equity loan as another example. Home equity loans are kind of cool because you've got this collateral, that's essentially your home value, and having that can help you get a lower interest rate than what you would pay on an unsecured loan. Because again, remember, interest rates are based off of your credit score, which is a reflection of your ability and willingness to pay. And so an unsecured loan, because they don't have anything to back it up, has a higher risk. If you don't pay on your home equity loan, they'll just come and take your house. So that's why they can give you such great rates on a home equity loan. Consolidation can be really helpful to reduce the total amount of interest that you'll pay. I'll show you an example of that. It can also help you change up your payments as well to make your payments more affordable. And really the benefit of it is to create a well-defined paydown plan. So with credit cards, one of the tricky parts is that, again, you can continue spending on it, which if you're continuing to spend, that doesn't help your paydown plan, right? In fact, it can actually take you further away from your goal. So here's that example of a debt consolidation. And mind you, these rates are, a couple years old now. I feel like our home equity, even that new consolidated loan could be realistic. So on this credit card, you can see they have almost a $2,000 balance with a 15.74% interest rate. Pay attention to the monthly payments here because this is where it gets really cool. So monthly payment of $50, their total interest that would be paid by the time they pay it off is $150. They also have another credit card for $500. Their monthly payment's $25, and they would have that paid off, in a couple of years. But what you see here is they're paying about $200 in interest, which doesn't seem like a lot, but then when you're like, it's a $500 balance, that does feel like a lot over that time. They also have this home equity loan that has $67,000 on it at an 8.25% interest rate. And their total interest over here is $20,000. Now here's where it gets fun, you guys. So in this example, they actually were able to reduce their interest rate, lower their total monthly payments, and also, I believe, they did extend their payoff date a little bit, but it's really not that far off from what it was originally. What you'll see is their total payoff is actually less than what it was with these accounts combined, and their total interest saved is their total interest paid is less than the home equity line of credit alone. Okay, so this can be a really exciting opportunity for somebody who's not only looking to accelerate their pay down plan, but it can also help them save money overall. So you can see there the total monthly payment savings of $112, total interest savings $2,000 almost. And I think that's really cool. So Mountain America does this thing called a value analyzer where you can come in and we can look at all of your debts all together and say, you know, hey, if we were to consolidate your loan, this is what we could save you. If that's something that you're interested in, you can go to, let me pull up the link for you. Sorry, it's not coming to mind right this minute. You can go to Mountain America's website, macu.com. You can just type in value analyzer and it should direct you to, you know, a page where you can schedule an appointment with somebody at a branch that's near you. So another thing we'll talk about on this is our balance transfers. I say balance transfers like it's hard. I don't know why I just said that. That was weird. But balance transfers can be really helpful because in a lot of cases, you know, they'll give you those promotional offers where, you know, you might get a lower interest rate for a period of time, such as like a 0%, which can be a really great way to save money on interest, especially, you know, right now, many credit cards, even at the lowest rate, are anywhere from, you know, 10.5 up to like 14-15%, and that's a great rate on a credit card. So if you have a credit card and you're looking at, you know, I can pay this down within a year or within 18 months comfortably and confidently in that, you know, something like a balance transfer might help you. One thing I encourage people to pay attention to, and this is probably just because I came from the credit card world prior to coming to Mountain America, and watched a lot of people spend money in these areas, are things like balance transfer fees. Generally, balance transfer fees are around 3%, and they'll say like a minimum of $5, and 3% is pretty good, but be careful with that because sometimes they will bump them up to 5%. When you're looking at like a $10,000 loan, that's $500. So be aware of that. One thing that Mountain America often does, we have a campaign that we run occasionally where you will be able to transfer without a balance transfer fee. In fact, I think we do that on a regular basis. Don't quote me on that. I don't want to mess that one up. Just look for, you know, look for financial institutions that will do that for you. They might waive the balance transfer fee or give you a lower balance transfer percentage fee. Another thing to be aware of is the go-to interest rate after your promotional period is over. So a 0% for 12 or 18 or 21 months is a killer deal, but only if you can pay off the balance before that promotional rate is over. If you don't pay off that balance, you will begin to pay interest on the loan or on the balance as soon as that promotional rate is over. And sometimes the rate is even higher than what you would have paid if you would have just kept the balance on the loan, the previous loan. So for example, you know, if you had a credit card that you were paying 18% on, but then you do a balance transfer and you get 6 months 0%, you still have a balance. You may actually lose money because maybe that go-to interest rate on your new credit card is 22%. That's not going to help you, right? So just be mindful of those things. Be mindful of the balance transfer fee and the go-to rate. Now let me show you how this can save you, because this is kind of cool. So you can see we've got these 2 credit cards moving over to this third credit card that's orange. So you've got a loan amount of $8,000, a loan amount of $10,000, their total interest rate, you know, listed here, and their monthly payment, $250. This one is scheduled to be paid off in almost 7 years, and the interest rate between these is over $5,000. Now, what we can do is we can roll these over to a credit card with $10,000 balance on it, interest rate of 11%, which is realistic. Like I said, anywhere from 10.5 all the way up to, you know, 15 right now is good. Maintain the same monthly payment and pay it off in just over 4 years, only paying $2,500 in interest. Now here's something we got to keep in mind. I told you we've got that balance transfer fee, so it's 3%, so $300. But still, our savings total, even after that balance transfer fee, still saving $2,700. So again, if that's something that motivates you or you're looking for a way to accelerate your pay down, this could be an option to help you pay down your debt a little bit quickly. Now remember though, this only works if we commit to no more debt. If we can't commit to no more debt, this isn't going to help. This is going to make the problem even worse. Okay. And so again, this is where having your plan, having an accountability buddy in place can really help you stay successful. The last thing I'll talk with you about is GreenPath. We partner with them. They're a nonprofit financial wellness organization, and they are really committed to helping people reduce their debt and take care of their finances. And they do that in a lot of different ways. But one of the things that differentiates us from GreenPath is their ability to do a debt management plan for you. So if you are somebody who feels like debt avalanche or debt snowball isn't going to work, consolidation or a balance transfer isn't going to work for you, or a refinance for that matter, and you feel like a lot of people that I refer to this service are often overwhelmed. Like they're just in up to their eyeballs, and they feel like unless somebody helps them really get into this, they're not going to be able to get out. Of course, there's an option to file bankruptcy. The problem with bankruptcy is it stays on your credit for 7 to 10 years. And in some cases, depending on the type of bankruptcy you file, you may still be obligated to repay some of those creditors. With debt management plan, this is a little bit different from filing bankruptcy. It's a little bit different from the strategies that we talked about before. What they do is they work with you to create a sustainable debt repayment plan. You repay all of your debt. This is not a debt settlement program. Okay, but what they will do for you is they will negotiate your minimum payments, they will negotiate interest rates and any fees accrued. They can help kind of minimize those. There are some nuances to this. So GreenPath is a paid service. You would pay for an enrollment fee, and then you'd pay for a monthly repayment fee. It's like up to $50, depending on how many debts you have. Another thing to know about this is oftentimes they will only work with you, like if you are willing to close out those accounts, again, because your goal is to pay down debt. Know that that can temporarily impact your credit score, but over the long run, it can actually improve your credit score over time. And then finally, they only work with unsecured debt. So if you have a mortgage, if you have an auto loan, those would not qualify for a debt management plan. Okay, but again, it can be a helpful service. If this is something that you're thinking might work for you, please set up an appointment with my team so that we can talk with you in more details. We used to have a process where, we'd just refer people over and not really have that conversation with them. But what we found is that our team was able to better identify a strategy, even if it was just, let's sit down and do a more intensive budget to help you stay on track. And so we want to be that first line of support for you to make sure that, if it is something like just better managing your budget, doing that is only going to improve your credit score, right? It's not sitting down with us and creating that plan would probably be more effective than just meeting with GreenPath. Do you have to be a member of Mountain America? No. The coaching services that we provide for you are free of charge. You can meet with us as frequently as you'd like. And we're not going to push any products or services on you. Like, we really believe in just doing this for the good of our community, because when people are doing well in our community, it's better for everybody. Okay. Great question. Thank you for asking. And Sadie, you'll have to forgive me. Are you incentivizing for coaching when they meet with us?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I just threw that in the chat. So if you receive financial wellness coaching either through Mountain America, or you can even go through URS, our retirement systems, or whoever, you can actually receive points for that. You would log into your WellSteps app, and there's a verification form under rewards, and you can get points for doing so. And it's fantastic, especially with Mountain America, because it's free.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you for sharing that. I didn't want to throw that out there. I was like, I'm pretty sure we do that, but didn't want to throw that out there and make it awkward. So thank you for your help with that. All right, so we are at the end of our presentation, you guys. I want to thank you so much for your participation. I hope that this has been helpful for you, if for nothing else, to kind of think about your debt management plan in a more effective manner, and how you can make it more sustainable while still being able to, enjoy your life. One of the things that I talk about in all aspects of money is yes, we have goals and we want to get there, but also it's important to enjoy the journey, right? That's so cliche, but I love it. And so creating a plan that is really sustainable and is going to suit your lifestyle. So what do we do with this information? You know, Salt Lake County is amazing and they let us take you off and work for a little bit so that you can learn these things and apply them to your life. And so, you know, some things that we encourage you to do just as you wrap up are things like meeting with an accountability partner. That can be your financial partner. It could be a friend. It could be a family member. It could be a guide. Get those points, you guys. And then try out that why, what, and how model. Give it a go. Again, you can go to macu.com/brain to learn more, and then take the time to organize your debts. Remember, I shared that worksheet with you. You can download it and fill it out and print it, or you can just print it out and do pen and paper. It's up to you. And then finally, look at your budget and then determine your pay down strategy. As I mentioned, if you are interested in accessing more resources, we have those available on macu.com/guide. And then we also have a feature called Bonsai. You guys actually have, Sadie, do you mind sharing your Bonsai link? You have
Yeah,
a
no
custom
problem.
page that's targeted specifically to your needs. And they do have some articles related to pay down plan. But then finally, if you are interested in scheduling a coaching appointment, you can actually scan this QR code and fill out the form, and you'll be able to schedule with us, I think, as soon as this week. And so if that's something that you're interested in doing, feel free to do that. I'll share this link in the chat as well so that you can use that. And then one more thing, if you don't mind helping us out, you know, our team is constantly looking for ways to improve our presentations and just kind of get a pulse on how we're doing. And so if you don't mind, I'm going to ask you to scan this QR code for me, do a quick 2-question survey about the presentation to just let us know how we're doing and if there's anything we can do better. And having said that, I'll wrap it up and turn it back over to Sadie. Thank you guys again.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Cass. I think it's so valuable to look at all these strategies and see which one would work for your relationship with money. Like you mentioned over and over again, it's going to be most sustainable when you know what your triggers are, when you know your spending habits to create goals rather than thinking that you need to fit into some sort of mold or some sort of one size fits all, because that's just not how it goes. It's just like with our health and wellness goals, you know, you have to try different things that work for us, and the same goes for finances. Are there any last minute questions? I saw one earlier. I'm not sure if we already addressed it, from Dee Dee. It said these examples don't take into account any continued spending, correct?
Yeah, and we did address that. That was showing the examples of snowball and avalanche method,
Yes.
and just reinforcing again that if we do set on a, you know, on a debt repayment plan, we want to make sure that we are not taking on any more debt, because obviously that's counterintuitive to where we're working on.
Yes. Excellent. Okay, well, if there's no questions, we'll let you all go. Thank you again, and hope you all have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. We'll see you later.